The night of October 24, 1944, the flag bridge of the battleship USS New Jersey, if in the Philippine Sea. Admiral William Halsey commands the Third Fleet, the most powerful naval force on Earth. Beside him stands his Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Robert Carney, the man everyone calls Mick. Scout planes have just found what Halsey has hunted all war: the Japanese aircraft carriers far to the north. Halsey gives the order to take the entire fleet after them, every carrier, every battleship. And that order will leave the door to the American invasion fleet standing wide open. Mick Carney is at his side for all of it. Robert Bostwick Carney was a career officer, Naval Academy class of 1916, a destroyer man who had risen on competence and nerve. As Halsey's Chief of Staff, he was the second brain of the Third Fleet. The officer who turned Halsey's aggressive instincts into operational orders, who ran the staff, who handled the details Halsey had no patience for. Halsey was the face and the fire. Carney was the planner behind him. The two men trusted each other completely, and at Leyte Gulf, that partnership would make one of the most controversial decisions in the history of the United States Navy. But to understand how that one night in the Philippine Sea would shadow the rest of Mick Carney's career, and how the planner at Halsey's elbow would climb to the very top of the Navy and then be pushed out of it, we have to understand the trap that was closing around both men on October 24, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was the largest naval battle ever fought. The Japanese had built a desperate, elaborate plan, and the bait at the center of it was the one thing Halsey wanted most in the world. To see why the decision haunted Carney, first see the trap. By October 1944, Japan's navy was dying, but it had one plan left. As American forces landed at Leyte in the Philippines, the Japanese sent 3 forces. A powerful center force of battleships under Admiral Kurita would punch through the San Bernardino Strait to attack the invasion fleet. A southern force would strike from below, and a northern force of aircraft carriers, nearly empty of planes, almost useless in a fight, under Admiral Ozawa, had one job: to be seen. Ozawa's carriers were bait, dangled to pull Halsey's fleet away from the strait. Japan was gambling everything on Halsey being Halsey. It worked. When the scouts reported Ozawa's carriers to the north, Halsey did not hesitate. Carriers were the prize. They were what had hunted his ships from Midway to the Solomons, and here they were, exposed. He ordered the entire Third Fleet north to destroy them, and in doing so pulled every American heavy ship away from the San Bernardino Strait, the back door to the invasion beaches. He believed the Japanese center force had been turned back earlier that day. He was wrong. Kurita's battleships had regrouped in the dark and were steaming, unopposed, straight for the strait Halsey had just left open. Behind the American fleet, the San Bernardino Strait now stood empty. There was no battle line guarding it, nothing between Kurita's battleships and the thin-skinned American invasion. Shipping off Leyte except a handful of small escort carriers and destroyers, light ships never built to fight battleships. On the New Jersey, racing north through the night, Halsey and Carney believed they had made the right call. Far to the south, Admiral Kinkaid's invasion fleet believed Halsey had left a force to guard the strait. Both could not be right. At dawn on October 25th, the Japanese battleships came through and fell on the little ships off Samar. Far to the north, the Japanese Admiral Ozawa watched the American fleet come for his nearly empty carriers and understood that his sacrifice was working. His ships existed that day only to be destroyed, to pull Halsey away. Ozawa would lose all 4 of his carriers and thousands of men, and he would count the mission a success because it had done exactly what Tokyo intended. It is one of the strange truths of Leyte Gulf. The Japanese decoy commander achieved his goal, and the American admiral who fell for it still won the battle. Because both men got part of what they wanted. The sailors off Samar paid the bill. What happened off Samar was one of the most desperate actions in American naval history. A handful of escort carriers and destroyers, the force called Taffy 3, turned and fought a fleet of battleships and heavy cruisers that outgunned them many times over. Destroyers charged battleships head-on. Pilots attacked with whatever they had and made dry runs with empty guns when the bombs were gone. They bought time with their lives. And it worked. Kurita, battered and convinced he faced a far larger force, eventually turned back. But men were dying off Samar while the most powerful fleet on Earth steamed away north. What happened next became one of the most famous moments in Navy history. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe. We are just getting to it. As the crisis off Samar became clear, Admiral Nimitz at Pearl Harbor sent Halsey an urgent message asking where his battleships were. To confuse enemy codebreakers, such messages were padded with nonsense phrases. The version that reached Halsey's bridge read, "Where is Task Force 34, the world wonders?" Halsey thought the last three words were a taunt from Nimitz. He threw his cap to the deck in a rage. Mick Carney grabbed him and told him to pull himself together. Then Halsey turned part of the fleet around. Too late to catch anyone. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was, in the end, an overwhelming American victory. The Japanese Navy effectively destroyed as a fighting force. Sane. But the controversy was immediate, and it never died. Halsey had taken the bait. He had left the strait open. Men off Samar had died because the most powerful fleet on Earth had gone chasing nearly empty carriers. Halsey defended the decision for the rest of his life, and standing beside him in every defense, the man who had helped plan and execute the move was Mick Carney. Carney never publicly broke with his commander. He carried his share of the decision in silence. What is remarkable is what happened to Mick Carney afterward. The Leyte Gulf controversy did not sink him. The Navy understood the decision had been Halsey's, and that Carney had served his commander loyally. After the war, his career accelerated. He held senior fleet commands. He commanded Allied forces in southern Europe as NATO took shape in the early 1950s. He was respected as one of the finest naval planners of his generation. And in 1953, Robert Carney reached the top. President Eisenhower named him Chief of Naval Operations, the highest uniformed officer in the United States Navy. As Chief of Naval Operations, Carney sat at the center of American military power in the early Cold War. He helped steer the Navy into the nuclear age, the era of jet aircraft, guided missiles, and the first nuclear-powered submarine, the Nautilus, authorized and built during his tenure. He advised the president. He testified before Congress. He was, nearly 4 decades after Annapolis, exactly where a career officer dreams of ending, at the very summit of his service. And then, in 1955, it ended, not with a retirement parade, but with a quiet, deliberate decision by Dwight Eisenhower not to keep him. The break came over Asia. In the spring of 1955, with Communist China and Nationalist Taiwan clashing over a chain of small offshore islands, Carney reportedly told a group of journalists at a private dinner that war was likely, that China might attack by mid-April. The remarks leaked. They contradicted the Eisenhower administration's public calm and embarrassed the White House at a delicate moment. Eisenhower was already leaning toward a different kind of naval leader. Whatever the precise reason, the president chose not to reappoint Carney when his term ended in August 1955. After 39 years in uniform, Mick Carney was eased out the door. The man Eisenhower chose to replace him made the ending sharper. To succeed Carney, the president reached down past dozens of more senior admirals and picked Arleigh Burke, a younger officer who had made his name commanding destroyers in the Pacific. Burke was junior to nearly everyone above him. Jumping him to the top was a stunning move, and it underlined the message. The Navy was turning a page, and Carney was the page being turned. Burke would serve an unprecedented 6 years as Chief of Naval Operations and become a legend. Carney, the planner who had stood beside Halsey at Leyte Gulf and climbed all the way up, quietly took off the uniform he had worn since 1916. Robert Carney did not retreat into bitterness. He moved into private business, serving as a corporate executive, and lived a long, dignified retirement. He gave occasional interviews about the Pacific War, always defending Halsey, always declining to second-guess the decision at Leyte Gulf. He had been there. He had helped make the call. He would not pretend, with the comfort of hindsight, that he would have done otherwise. Robert Bostwick Carney died on June 25, 1990, at 94 years old. He had outlived Halsey by more than 3 decades, and he had kept faith with him to the end. Halsey himself had been promoted to 5-star Fleet Admiral after the war, the highest rank the Navy offers. Despite the Leyte controversy and despite a second disaster, a typhoon that cost him ships and men in December 1944, the Navy decided his aggression and his value to morale outweighed his mistakes. He died in 1959. The contrast between the two men is its own story. Halsey, the famous warrior, kept his rank and his legend. Carney, the planner who made him work, rose higher in peacetime and was quietly let go. The fire was celebrated, the planner was used and set aside. The argument about Leyte Gulf has run for 80 years. Was Halsey right to take the fleet north? The case for the Japanese carriers were a legitimate target. Destroying enemy carriers had been the whole logic of the Pacific War, and the escort carriers off Samar, against the odds, held. The case against, he abandoned the strait, broke the invasion fleet's protection, and only luck and the sacrifice of small ships prevented disaster. Mick Carney helped make that decision and defended it for 46 more years. Was he loyal to a fault or right all along? Even now, naval officers argue both sides, and the sea has never given a final answer. Admiral Robert Bostwick Carney died on June 25, 1990, at 94. He had entered the Naval Academy before the First World War and stood on Halsey's Flag Bridge for the largest naval battle ever fought. He rose to Chief of Naval Operations, the summit of his service, and was eased out of it by a president who wanted another man. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery, the chief of staff who turned one admiral's fury into orders. The planner history blamed, then promoted, then forgot. The man who stood beside Halsey on the worst night of the admiral's reputation, and never once stepped away from him. If your father, your grandfather, your uncle, anyone in your family served in the 3rd Fleet in Taffy 3, off Samar on the escort carriers and destroyers that bought time with their lives, Samar, or anywhere in the Battle of Leyte Gulf and the Pacific War, leave their name and what they did in the comments below. Don't just leave the name. Tell us one thing about them. One thing they did, one thing they said, one thing you remember. The men who were there deserve more than a name in a database. They deserve to be remembered as people. Subscribe if you want the next story. There are more of them.